Hi everyone, William here with the Grand Duke Dmitri Diary series on YouTube, Diary and Letter series. We are in 1914 right now with a longish letter that Dmitri wrote to Nicholas II from Palermo in Sicily, where he'd gone for his health. And the date is, let me see, 19th March. And this is just a fantastic letter. It's one of the best pieces of Dmitri writing that is out there. It's been published, so I'm not going to worry about the fact that it's a little intimate, not in a sexual sense, but yeah, Dmitri talking about deep feelings and emotions, but it has been published, and I've never really been shy about that anyway. I probably should think more about ethics, but I want people to understand him. So, okay, in the previous section of the letter, well, he was in a very poetic frame of mind. I think when he was a little, maybe mildly depressed, that was kind of, that brought that out in him, that poetic quality that he had. So he was talking very poetically about the sea and about the life-giving air, and he talked about an English woman who was there staying in the hotel, the same hotel as him, and that she had such a severe nervous disorder that she couldn't even get up and walk, but now she was playing tennis, and so he was really pretty happy about this place. Although we'll find out it wasn't in all ways what he would have liked it to be. He himself was feeling much better, and he mentions that Paul and Olga, his father and stepmother, were getting ready to move to Tsarskoye Selo. The banishment had been lifted that Nicholas II had placed on them way back in 1902. It had been lifted after 10 years in 1912, but they stayed in exile a little longer so that they could have a house built in Tsarskoye, and now they were getting ready to move back. All right, so we have, I think, 2 more sections of this letter. This one is a little long, so I guess I better stop yakking and move forward. All right, here we go. The first week, I was insanely bored, though I have my dearest General Laming, who so touchingly accompanies me. Count and Countess Kokovtsov arrived here about 4 days ago. It seems to be my fate to run into the Kokovtsovs everywhere. We have gone on several interesting outings and seen interesting things. Today we will take a long car ride. We went to see the ruins of an old Greek temple and a theater from the 5th century AD, and while I was walking, I suddenly had such a frightfully vivid memory of our outings together that I wanted to chat with you, to talk. Unfortunately, the only way to do that is to write. So right then and there, I decided not to give a damn about your time constraints and annoy you with this long and perhaps boring letter. Well, forgive me. Yes, thank God, my health is now better, and what's really pleasant is that it's not merely my physical health that is improved, but my mental health as well. During my stay in Petersburg, it was precisely my mental equilibrium that plunged so frighteningly. I became irritable and stupid. It's very unpleasant to lose control of yourself, but now je me retrouve. It's boring for you to read all of this, I understand that, but I also understand that it's not a matter of complete indifference to you. I want to talk to you, and then without thinking about what I'm going to write, I just sort of do it, seeing you before me in your study in Tsarskoye under a hanging lamp. I repeat, it's a pleasure to write you, my dear, because I know and feel that you understand me. De temps en temps, I send a dry report about my health to Boulogne, and basta, ... question mark, exclamation point. That's an Italian Italian term. It seems to me here, I think it means enough, but it seems to me that it kind of is a way of saying here, and nothing from them, or that's enough for them, or something like that. I don't speak Italian. Dmitri did speak Italian. I don't know if he did in 1914, but he learned it. At least that's what his son told me. Anyway, so we find out, I mentioned in one of the previous videos from this letter that I didn't think Georgy Mikhailovich Laming was with him, but now we find out that Laming was with him. You know, the man who had been his caregiver as a child, his tutor plus father in residence, and stayed on with him as a kind of companion. Dmitri is still only 22. So it makes sense that Laming would be with him. He so touchingly accompanies me, Dmitri says, so apparently it was a choice on his part. It wasn't like, well, you're an employee and this is your job. Okay, what else? So yeah, you know, he's quite sentimental. He's quite poetic. So he's in a particular frame of mind that we don't all that often see in his writing. You know, it's not rare, but so who are Count and Countess Kokovtsov? Well, to begin with, Dmitri puts the words Count and Countess in quotation marks, and this is because this was a very new title for them, and it was kind of a consolation prize. It was kind of a parting gift from Nicholas II, who wanted to get rid of them. And until January of that same year, March, so only less than 3 months before, Count Kokovtsov, Vladimir Nikolaevich, had been the prime minister of Russia. Had taken over from Stolypin, the famous Stolypin, I believe, and he'd been the prime minister since 1911. And before that, he had been, from 1906 on, the Minister of Finance, taking over from Sergei Witte, also famous or rather somewhat notorious. And he had kept that position, so he'd been both the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance from 1911, then from 19 to 1914 he had both positions. Well, what was the problem with Vladimir? Why had he been fired and given a consolation prize by Nicholas? Very simple. He was strongly anti-Rasputin. He had urgently requested that the Tsar send Rasputin back to Siberia. And, you know, once he did that, his fate was sealed. He wasn't going to last very long. And I quite admire the man. He was conservative, but a moderate and a serious person, a real professional. He would have continued to do important things for Russia. A really highly competent man, in my opinion. Some historians may differ. He kind of won me over when I was reading the memoirs that he left. And yes, it's a little foolish to take memoirs too much at face value. But I remember being impressed by them. And unfortunately, I can't remember the title, but I know they have been translated into English. And it's interesting that Dmitri was on these kind of terms with them. You know, Vladimir Nikolaevich was 60. His wife was in her 50s. He was 22. He was also very anti-Rasputin. He was also a moderate. He was also very interested in politics. So from that perspective, it does make sense to me. Otherwise, it would be quite surprising. But he doesn't hesitate to talk about spending time with them. You know, he's not afraid that Nicholas is going to react badly and say, oh, stay away from them. So, you know, It's very nice, isn't it, that at this quite young age, he's willing to spend his day going on long drives and sightseeing with this middle-aged couple and serious people, instead of off having some kind of flirtation. Anyway, I'm impressed by it, as you can tell. The wife's name was Anna Fyodorovna, and yeah, Vladimir Nikolaevich and Anna Fyodorovna. Both survived the revolution, by the way. Both left Russia and survived the revolution. I think they died in the 40s and 50s, respectively. So the sightseeing, yeah, it makes me a bit nostalgic, because back in, I think it was 1991, I did, this sort of poor Americans version of the Grand Tour, and went hitchhiking through Europe with a friend of mine of the same age, and we ended up we were really just sort of flitting here and there, and we somehow ended up in Sicily and in Syracuse, and that was one of the most fantastic places we went to. And it had, just as Dmitri describes, it had a Greek temple, it had a Greek theater, it also had a Roman amphitheater a little bit outside of town, and that was probably spring, and there weren't many people there, and Eric and I just had the most fantastic time. We were young men like Dmitri, in our early 20s, and we ran all over that temple not the temple, but the theater and the Roman amphitheater, and had a wonderful time. And the temple was very interesting, because it was indeed a Greek temple, but a church had just been built around it. I mean, literally built around it. So you would go inside and you would be in a temple inside a church. But of course, the whole thing was now a Christian church. But anyway, I can't help talking about things like that when I read this portion of the letter, because it was so great. And I'm glad Dmitri got to have an experience like that too. And it reminds him of his outings with Nicholas. So that's interesting. We get a little bit of a window into the kind of father-son activities that Dmitri and Nicholas did. They went out and saw interesting places. They had outings, and they also talked in Nicholas's study. And Dmitri had a chance to probably talk about some serious things with him. So he misses that. He talks about this hanging lamp. And, physical description is pretty rare for Dmitri. So to mention something like a hanging lamp, he's really thinking nostalgically and seeing it in his mind. And then we have this very interesting comment about his mental health and about what was going on back in Russia. And it sounds like it was less his physical health. He had a cough, we know that. But it sounds like it was more, something really happened as far as depression or something like that. I became irritable and stupid. He says it's very unpleasant to lose control of yourself, so he felt like he was out of control. It was precisely my mental equilibrium that plunged so frighteningly. So those are pretty strong words. Personally, I would expect, I would suspect depression, maybe clinical depression, but I'm not a psychologist or psychiatrist, and it could have been something else, but it was certainly very interesting. So now this letter, even more than his letters usually are, it's very self-deprecating. It's very, very much, I'm sorry I'm writing to you. I'm sorry I'm imposing myself on you. This letter is an imposition. It's boring for you. So, he jokes here and there in this letter, but in this particular instance, he really feels bad. And he really feels, like, I was out of control, and that was horrible. Okay, and this finally, this is very interesting what he says when he's talking to Nicholas, that I know and feel that you understand me. If you remember in that letter that he wrote to his sister from Tegernsee in 1910, where he was saying, I'm misunderstood, essentially. I'm smarter than other people. He was doing it jokingly. He was telling his sister to try and make his sister laugh, but on the other hand, it was like, I'm this brilliant fellow and nobody understands me. Well, that's not so unusual for a chap of that age. And I think Dmitri was smarter than a lot of the people around him. And I think he had different political views, and I think he did feel very misunderstood. But apparently Nicholas, either he's flattering Nicholas, or it was true that Nicholas understood him, or made an effort to understand him more than some of the other people around him. And here he's contrasting Nicholas with Paul and making it sound that, yeah, all they want is a dry report about my health. That's it. Otherwise, they're indifferent. So yeah, very interesting stuff. What do we have next time? Well, more interesting stuff. This is going to be a little more sort of joking or being bold, as at the beginning of the letter when he suggests that Nicholas used the letter as toilet paper. Obviously he understands that you could be a little risque with Nicholas, or a little bold. So it will be the last section of the letter, and well worth listening to. The whole letter is really fantastic. So I hope to see you then. Bye.